So you guys have one of these containers. I'm only gonna use half of this, and you guys just use half of yours, because it will stand there and take forever on this, okay? I have, and this would be a clean spoon. So anytime you get ready to go in and do NG tube care or feeding, checking residual, go to the pantry or the kitchen, get 2 cups, and it's the ones with the markings on it, right? The mannequin I have down there has got 2 of these cups, but I only had 3 altogether, so that's why you're gonna pretend this is a cup. It's one of those that's got the markings, so you get 2 of those and a spoon, okay? In the room, you'll find this, okay? And usually these are in the bathroom or whatever to be able to use, okay? So it's kind of the same concept. When I come in here, I'll put a drape, paper drape, something down to be able to, sometimes you'll even see people pull paper towel and set it out. You know what I mean? Something to be able to have stuff set out on. And then of course we'll be cleaning afterwards. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to feed him, but like you said, I need to check residual. Excuse me. So I'm going to come over here. I have this tube. It has 2 ports. I just put this in. I forgot to close ports. So these would all be closed. Okay. This would be where you would see the 10 milliliter in here, the balloon. So it's in there tight. These ports, the nice thing about them is they're the same size. So this port is big. This port is small. But if you take out the additional part, they're both the same size. Does that make sense? Which makes it really nice. Okay. Used to be the old ones, they have the ports that were all the small ones, and they kept blowing out the pressure. So eventually nurses would just tape them shut because they kept blowing when you put a lot of fluid into the main one, okay? So you should always flush by your protocol on your facility. In this particular case, I'm gonna check residual before I do anything. So I'm gonna come in here, okay? Open this up. Back here. Now this will have residual in it because the stomach is full. Oh, it must be emptied it out. That's a minute, it's not full, but anyway. Anyway, so I'm pulling back. You pull back until you get pressure. You can't go anywhere, okay? And then you put it in, put it back. Whatever you pull out, you put back in. Because if you don't, you'll mess up the electrolytes. Does that make sense? And so I'll say no residual, or if I pull out 15 or 25, I'll say 15, 25 residual pulled in. Sometimes though, people don't digest very well. So when I go over here and I check residual, I may fill up this whole syringe with fluid. At that point, I go and I'll dump it into a container somewhere. I don't care what container, whether you do this or one of your cups. And then you've got to go back and you've got to see exactly how much residual is in the stomach. So you may have 60, and I may go back and get 15, right? Pull back and I get tension with 15. So at that point, I would put the 15 back in, okay? After I put the 15 back in, I would take this off. Put this back up. Everything that I took out, I have to put back. So if I have the other 60, I have to put it back in, or you will screw up the electrolytes. It has to go back in. Does that make sense?
We measure it, then put it back.
Yes. So I have the 20, so you'd be able to see if you're just getting stuff out and you don't have to empty it. Of course, you also get an idea too, if you fill a 60 cc syringe, that's just only be 60 in there. Does that make sense? But you still have your measurements here, or if it's those cups, you still have your measurements there. Whatever you take out, you have to take and put back in with the electrolytes, okay? Then they'll have protocols saying if it's a certain amount, if you get 120 mil of residual, hold the feeding for an hour or hold it for 2 hours. And then before you go back and feed again, you'll once again check residual because it has to be below their amount. You know what I'm saying? They say if it's 120, hold it, so next time you come back in it's 100, then you're good. But if you ignore that and you feed them, it'd be like having a big meal and then somebody else putting more of a big meal in there. Okay? Okay, so now we know that his residual is low and we're going to feed him, okay? So I'm gonna come over here. Oh, something else I want to do too. That stuff is very sweet, so you need to really should use alcohol. You may not see it used. You really should use alcohol because sweets go to the top of this stuff, right? And so we really should kind of just get this cleaned off real good.
Sorry, what'd you say goes to the top of that?
You know, the fluid, you put in the fluid, and the fluid is sweet nutrients.
Oh, sweets.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so I'm going to come through here in alcohol. You may or may not see that. I would recommend you do it, but sometimes, okay? I bin this too because I don't wanna put a lot of air into them once I open this port. So I'm gonna come back over here, put this down in here, right? And I'm gonna come back over here and I'm gonna flush first, right? Flush. Okay, I'm gonna come through here, I'm gonna lift up. And before it gets all the way emptied down in there, see it's still there, I'm gonna come back over and do my feeding, because I don't want air. I wanna add so I don't have air in there, does that make sense? Here. The higher you go, the faster you go, the lower you go, the slower you go. Does that make sense on the height and stuff? Now, you know how you can tell when they've got a lot of air in them? That's why I also don't like pushing. They have a lot of air in there. They'll burp a lot. And I had one guy who was in a chair, and I was giving him his feeding, and he burped. And he had so much pressure in his stomach that, I mean, it came out like a volcano everywhere. On him, on me. So you'll see some people push it. I'm not a pusher, I'm a gravity giver. But do what you want to do. I just don't like to put a lot of air in, because it will come back out. Plus, a lot of air in the stomach hurts them. Okay?
Temperature of what you're feeding?
The temperature should be room temperature. Now I'm going to come back in with the last flush. Your water, your flush, should be lukewarm or warm. Okay? Lukewarm, warm. Never cold, because if you make it cold, then they are going to have cramps.
Yeah.
Okay? So there's the feeding and stuff. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to give medication. You guys don't have to give all of this if you don't want to. In real life, I would, but you'll be here forever. We've got a lot of stuff to do today. Now, over here, you guys still have, we have the flush and stuff. If I'm given a med, I'm given a pill med. I will take this out, and you guys are each going to give one of these pills. Okay? Now, have you ever seen these crushers in there? A lot of times people stick the crusher in and bust it up. May I suggest you guys go like this with one of these cups, put it in, and then another cup on top. Because if you use a crusher with that stuff, you have to clean out that crusher. If people forget, you may be giving somebody blood pressure medication that's residual. Okay? So I have all this stuff in here. Okay. Back up. So I have this up. Putting it down in here. Fluid. See how it's nice and empty out of here? This is still nice and clean. Like I said, you would have a clean spoon for everybody. Every time you go in, so you would throw these away after you get done with them. And every time you go in to feed, 2 cups in a spoon. You may see it done otherwise, but I'm going to stir. Now, there are different ways that they'll do it too. So I'm also going to have you guys give 5 ml of this. 5 ml, okay? Get 5 ml of that. Now, many times if it's like a liquid and a syrup, they'll mix them together. Other times, it depends on your protocol. They may have you give flush, med, flush, med, flush, med. Okay? Other times they'll just mix it together. So it depends on where you're at. Now, also medications. If they're on the G-tube, may I suggest that, and it's a new one, you call down to pharmacy and you say they are now on a G-tube, because some of that medication cannot be given enteric-coated. You can't crush enteric-coated medication. So if you crush it and you put it into the G-tube, then it's going to metabolize different, it's going to distribute different. So call your pharmacy and say, hey, I now have a G-tube in, can we get these medications changed over to appropriate medication for the G-tube? And you may say, well, I have some and I'll have to call the doctor for different changes over, or you may have to call the doctor for different changes over. But anytime stuff's got a enteric coat or something, you've got to do different. Does that make sense? So it's just easier. Lab, and because I don't want to see, I've seen nurses go in and they just take whatever it is. They don't care, it's their medication, and they just start putting it together. So call pharmacy. If you know this is new G-tube, call pharmacy and say, they've got these meds over. Because pharmacy, when they put stuff in, they'll write per G-tube, per G-tube, per G-tube. Does that make sense? All right. So now, I'm going to go back. If you're given medications, you usually don't have to check residual because usually people eat at 6, 12, and 5, but they get their medication at 9, 3, and 9. So you need to know when they've eaten and all that stuff. Either way, they have to have their medication in, whether they have residual or not. Right? Okay. So now I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to come back up. I'm going to bend it because I'm not a fan of a lot of stuff in there. Okay. What did I say you put in first? Flush? Yes?
Yeah.
So I'm coming through and I'm doing a flush. Yeah, he's almost got it in there. Here comes my. And go some more of my flush.
And for that flush, you're just using tap water.
Yeah, you can use regular water like they drink, and then have them coming back in with their medication. If you have like medication left in here, you may have to swirl it in there some more so it goes. You know what I'm saying? You may have to keep adding stuff to it. It's gonna be stuff in the puppy.
And you're holding that vent just to keep the drip rate, if you will, slower.
I'm holding it so I don't put air in him.
Okay.
I know that'll feed in there, okay?
How often are you crushing pills like that versus the pharmacy switching them over to something that goes through the IV?
See, on that one, I would have to pull this one back in there because he stopped up. So I'd have to clip this back up and get him on out till it goes in there. Does that make sense? How often? Usually pharmacy is pretty quick on that stuff. If you tell them, they'll get stuff over real good, and then they'll go into, and they'll say, your key will be, they'll say, per G-tube. Pharmacy will usually add some addendum, per G-tube, per G-tube.
Okay. And so, okay. Yeah, that's not quite my question, but.
Okay, no,